Boredom is not a modern invention. It didn't arrive with smartphones or suburban sprawl or a Netflix queue that somehow never has anything good on it. Ancient people got bored too, and what's genuinely fascinating is what they came up with to fix it. Think about a child sitting in Egypt around 2000 BCE. No screens, no plastic, no toy store, but archaeologists have pulled wooden dolls out of Egyptian tombs dating back to roughly 2030 BCE. Some of the oldest toys ever found anywhere on Earth. They were carved from wood, shaped from fabric, molded in terracotta. They were small, portable, and made with obvious care. Someone made those for a child who needed something to do. That's a feeling every parent across all of human history understands completely. And it wasn't just dolls. Across civilizations from the Indus Valley to the Roman Empire, children had pull toys, little animal-shaped figures on wheels. Little animal-shaped figures carved from wood or clay and mounted on wheels that you could drag behind you. Clay whistles, often shaped like birds, turned up in ancient China and the Middle East. Balls made from animal bladders, leather, fabric, and reeds showed up everywhere. Some were solid bundles tied tight, others were hollow and air-filled. The specific material changed depending on where you lived. But the impulse was the same. Kids wanted to throw things, chase things, make noise, and move. Then there were dice. Carved from ivory or bone, ancient dice showed up in Egypt and Rome in shapes that would look completely familiar to you today. The six-sided die is not a new idea. It is an ancient idea. While dice were sometimes used for divination, trying to read the will of the gods and how the bones fell, they were also just fun. Games of chance have always had a pull on human beings, that specific mix of suspense and luck. That makes your heart jump a little when the pieces are tumbling. Before dice, there were knucklebones, small bones from sheep or goats that people tossed and caught and competed with. They were a forerunner of dice games and apparently just as addictive, but ancient people didn't just leave fun up to chance. Some of them built structure into it. The royal game of dates back to around 2600 BCE in Mesopotamia. Egyptian Senate goes back even further to around 3100 BCE, which means people were sitting down across a board from each other, applying strategy, reading their opponent, and probably arguing about the rules. Roughly 5,000 years ago, these weren't simple diversions. They were social rituals, ways to compete, connect, and kill an afternoon. Sound familiar? Kites appeared in China about 3,000 years ago, which means at some point an ancient person watched a piece of material catch the wind and thought, what if I made that happen on purpose? There's something almost poetic about it. You have no internet, no TV, no radio, and your solution to a slow afternoon is to master the wind. And then there's play acting. Roman children, and almost certainly children long before them, staged mock sword fights, reenacted battles, performed little dramas with each other. They tried on adult roles, they invented stories, they turned a field or a courtyard into a battlefield or a marketplace or a palace, using nothing but imagination and whoever was willing to play along. What all of this tells you is something pretty important. When ancient people got bored, they didn't just sit there. They made things. They invented games with rules and stakes. They competed with each other. They created objects specifically designed to produce fun. They built social rituals around play and turned idle time into connection. The tools were simpler: a carved bone, a ball of leather, a wooden duck on wheels. But the underlying need was exactly the same as the one that makes you reach for your phone when the room goes quiet. Humans have always needed stimulation, competition, social connection, and a reason to feel alive in an otherwise slow moment. Ancient people just had to build their entertainment from scratch, which honestly makes it a little more impressive. And while all of that everyday play was happening across the ancient world, one civilization decided that personal amusement simply wasn't enough. Rome took the whole concept of defeating boredom and turned it into a spectacle. The Roman poet Juvenal had a theory about what people really wanted. He called it painomet, circenses. Bred in circuses, his idea was that if you gave the public enough food and enough entertainment, you could ease just about any discontent. The government wouldn't need to do much else. Keep people fed and keep them distracted, and they would stay manageable. It sounds cynical, and it was meant to be, but it also accidentally revealed something true about human nature. People have always needed spectacle. Rome just industrialized it. The Romans had a word for their public festivals: ludi. These weren't casual afternoon events. Ludi were multi-day affairs combining chariot races, theatrical performances, athletic contests, and gladiatorial shows. On a scale that drew crowds comparable to a modern Olympics, they were state-sponsored, religiously framed, and politically important. Politicians sponsored games to win favor. Emperors staged them to demonstrate power, and ordinary Romans showed up in enormous numbers because, frankly, there was nothing else on earth like it. Chariot racing was the centerpiece. The Circus Maximus in Rome could hold somewhere between 150,000 and 250,000 people, which means on a race day that building contained more people than most cities on the planet at the time. Fans didn't just watch neutrally, they chose sides. Charioteers raced for factions identified by color: red, green, blue, and white. And Roman fans supported their faction with the kind of passionate, occasionally unhinged loyalty that modern sports fans would find completely recognizable. There were favorites, rivalries, arguments, and almost certainly a lot of money changing hands. And the races came fast, up to 24 races in a single day, which meant that if your driver crashed or lost in the first heat, you didn't have long to wait before something new was happening at full speed. Then there were the gladiators. Gladiatorial combat is probably the Roman entertainment that modern people find hardest to process. The collision of athletic spectacle and lethal violence staged in front of cheering crowds, but it was a durable institution. Gladiatorial games lasted lasted from the early days of Roman public life all the way until 404 AD, which means this form of entertainment held the attention of the Roman world for centuries across enormous political and cultural change. There was genuine skill involved, genuine training, genuine risk, and apparently a genuine and sustained appetite for watching it. Whatever you think of it morally, it tells you something about what communal entertainment can become. When scale and state resources are applied, and then there were the baths, which were something else entirely. Roman public baths were not just places to get clean. They were leisure centers, social hubs, probably the closest thing the ancient world had to a community center. Or a health club or a cafe, all rolled into one. You could swim, work out, play board games, read, or simply find someone interesting to talk to. The baths were open to people across the social spectrum, which made them genuinely democratic spaces, at least in the sense that boredom doesn't discriminate, and neither did the pools. A Roman visiting the baths wasn't just managing hygiene. They were filling their afternoon with something worth doing. It's worth noting that the evidence for all of this is richer for Rome than for many other ancient societies. Roman writers wrote about it, Roman architects built for it, and Roman archaeologists have left us an unusually clear picture. Other ancient cultures had their own forms of communal entertainment, but the record is less complete. What Rome adds to the story is scale and deliberate design. Ancient individuals built toys and dice and board games because they needed small personal ways to pass the time. Rome built stadiums and bath complexes and multi-day festivals because boredom at a civilizational level requires civilizational solutions. But even in Rome, when the games were done and the baths were closed, people went home and did what people have always done. They had dinner parties. They played music. They rolled dice. They played ball games in the courtyard. The spectacle was the dramatic version of leisure, but the quiet version was always there underneath, and that's the real takeaway from all of this. Whether you're a child in ancient Egypt dragging a wooden duck across a dirt floor, or a Roman citizen arguing about chariot factions, the need underneath the behavior is identical. Humans need engagement, connection, and stimulation. We always have. Every toy ever carved, every game ever invented, every stadium ever built is just a different answer to the same question you asked this morning when you picked up your phone.